Okay, this evening we are going to move on to chapter 12, I think. Let's see what we can get
Brother
through
David,
by way of revision before we get there. But I would like to.
Brother David, you promised you would explain about the fifth seal and the sixth seal. Remember I asked you for that?
All right, Sister Bobby. I'm going to do a bit of revision, so I think we will cover it. All right.
Okay.
Um. Yes. I I I just want to remind us of something as we are about to start, and that is in our study of the prophecy of Daniel and Revelation. Please bear in mind that the most significant thing we're trying to do is to take a bird's eye view. We're trying to get up high where we can look down and see if we can pick up the main elements of the prophecy. I know a lot of the time when we start studying the Bible, and especially prophecy, what happens is that we get involved in the details. And the details can become confusing, sometimes even irrelevant if you don't see the bigger picture first. So I just want us to bear that in mind. Because so the most important thing in our prophecy studies, the most important thing is that we're trying to understand the big picture, what is happening on a macro level, what is happening on the big picture. Once we can see the big picture, we will have a better potential for understanding the individual pieces, the smaller pieces. So this evening, as I'm going to do a little bit of revision because based on the perspective I have tried to present, we have two divisions to the book of Revelation, or two major divisions. There are probably about four, but we are looking at the two major divisions, and those two divisions are the judgment of the kingdom of Christ, let's say the judgment of the church, and the judgment of the kingdom of the beast. And as I tried to point out, this is related to what is happening in the book of Daniel, especially Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel 7, we see the theme of judgment, judgment of the beast and judgment of the Son of Man, judgment of their kingdoms. And we see that this judgment is explained in detail. We have a detailed look in the book of Revelation. That's what Revelation is about, the main part of Revelation. And so we saw that Revelation chapter 4 to chapter 11 is focused on the judgment of the kingdom of Christ, the judgment of the church, or an examination of the kingdom of Christ. And then the Revelation 12 to Revelation 19 focuses on the kingdom of the beast, the development of the kingdom of the beast and the judgment of that kingdom. So you really have these two significant divisions, where these two parts of Revelation can be placed side by side, and you can see how they correspond to each other. It's the same period of history, but from different perspectives. So with that in mind, we have kind of completed part 1. We have gone from chapter 4 to chapter 11. So what I'm going to do for a start this evening is to do a revision of the outline. Just the outline, certainly not in detail. I'll pause a little bit on seal number 5 and 6, because Sister Bobby especially wanted to look at that. I'll pause on seal number 5 and 6 and just do a little revision of what the meaning of it. All right. So let me kind of open up my diagrams. I'm just going to use the diagrams and the charts that I set up and just look at them very quickly. And then I'm going to share my screen. All right, so first of all, an outline of Revelation, of the overall view of Revelation, the way I understand it, what I've tried to share with all of us. So, my goodness, this thing here is not giving me justice. I don't know why it has gone to the second row. That's certainly not what I want to see. Give me a second, let me sort it out. Give me a second, brethren. Okay. All right, for some reason, it has something mixed up in here, but I think if I have to just skip through, I will do it, but let me see. All right, that's where we should start. Are you all seeing my screen? Let me go back to the screen. Share my screen. All right, so anyway, Revelation 4 to 11 focuses on, here are the main elements of Revelation 4 to 11. What we have in Revelation, starting with Revelation chapter 6, is the opening of the book of the seven seals. And during this period, we have, first of all, an examination of the church in the past. I have it labeled here as the dead are judged. But what we are looking at is the history of the church in the past. And as we pointed out, this history is outlined under the symbolism of four horses. Then part two of the seven seals is the examination of the living. And we see that this involves the sealing of the 144,000. The 144,000, as we know, is the last part of the church, the very last portion of the church before Jesus comes again. All other Christians will be dead. You and I might be dead by the time the 144,000 is appears. Maybe, maybe not. We are in the last days, so we all might be a part of that group. But in examining the kingdom of Christ, first of all, of course, naturally, you examine the past. So we had the four horses, then we had the souls under the altar, then we have the sealing of the 144,000. Anyway, that's what happens in Revelation 4 to 11. Then the next thing we had was the censer was cast down. The censer under seal number 7, the censer is cast down. And the casting down of the censer, we said it represents the end of grace, the close of probation. And after the censer was cast down, you had the 7 trumpets. Now we are given the first 6 trumpets, then there's a kind of break. And during that break, we have Revelation 10 and Revelation 11, which is what we looked at last week, right? During that period, we saw the angel came down and gave John a little book to eat. It was sweet in his mouth, bitter in his belly, and he was told he must prophesy again. The temple was measured. The 2 witnesses testify. The 2 witnesses were killed. And I think this thing is giving me what I would call a little bad mileage. It's skipping to the wrong chart. I think I must have numbered this thing incorrectly. I can use another thing that will sort it properly, but that is going to take up a lot of time. Let me just see if I can. Yeah, it keeps dropping in an odd frame every now and then. I know why. All right, anyway. You have the 2 witnesses killed, and the 2 witnesses are resurrected. And then you have Christ receives his kingdom. Now, this is kind of the outline of Revelation 4 to Revelation 11. I'm going to come to the seals, Sister Bobby. I'm going to come to the seals. But I just want us to get this overall outline so we can see the big picture. So this is how it is. You have the 7 seals, which includes the examination of the church in the past, which is called the judgment of the dead. You have the examination of the church, the living church, which is the 144,000. At the end of this, grace comes to an end. Probation is closed. The angel fills the censer, the vessel of mercy. He fills it with fire and he throws it to the earth. And we see the 7 plagues are about to be poured out, which are described here as 7 trumpets. The first 6, you have the first 6 trumpets, which are terrible, devastating events taking place on earth. Then it seems like there's a break. It seems like there's a break, and you get chapter 10 and chapter 11, but it's not really a break. What I pointed out is that it's a flashback. God takes us back into the past, between when we come to trumpet number 7, before it blows, God says, hold on, hold on. Let me show you something that happened previous to this. And why does he do it? Because when the 7th trumpet sounds, the mystery of God is going to be finished. And of course, the question in my mind and your mind is, hold on, hold on. What is this mystery of God and how is it to be finished? Or God says, okay, before you ask the question, let me give you the answer. So it takes us back and he shows us what happens. He shows us about the measuring of the temple. He shows us a little book. I should have had a little book on this because it should have been in chapter 10, but I don't have it. In chapter 10, the little book of Daniel is opened. It's sweet in the mouth, it's bitter in the belly. A movement begins that is based on prophecy. And this movement is going to become the movement that is a catalyst in finishing the mystery. Out of this movement, you have the final preaching message because you have the two witnesses who are going to testify based on the eating of the book. These two witnesses are going to testify, and then after a while, they are going to be killed. The work of the Holy Spirit and the work of the Word of God come to an end. It's the same. It corresponds to that same period when the censer is cast down. It means that the work of God comes to an end. There's no more grace. The work of God has been killed on this earth. Nobody else will be saved. So then you begin to have the plagues or the trumpet. And at this time, you could say that the witnesses come back to life. In what sense? In the sense that the things that God's people have been warning against, they begin to appear. And these people who have killed the work of God, who have silenced the witnesses of God, they come to realize that the word of God is true. Because these things that have been prophesied are happening before their eyes. This is not that the witnesses come back alive where they can save people. No, salvation is past, but they come back to life in the sense that people are compelled to admit, to accept that the word of God is true. And then, of course, you have the 7th trumpet sounding, and the kingdom of God is received by God's people. The kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ. So that's the general outline of the first, from chapter 4 to chapter 11 of Revelation. That's a general outline. Now, if you look at it, you see that it involves the judgment of Christ, first of all, and it involves the judgment of the beast, the other part of Revelation. I mentioned this already. In Revelation 4 to 11, you have the book of 7 seals. It's kind of a repetition of what I just went through. All right. Like I say, I kind of have this thing mixed up, or the software I'm using is not really giving it justice. But what we can see here is that when you go to Revelation 12 and 19, I'll show this diagram again because it shows you that it shows you how the two prophecies overlap. While the book of the 7 seals is open and the dead are being judged, the dragon attacks the remnant. While the 144,000 is being sealed, the wicked are receiving the mark of the beast. When the censer is cast down, according to Revelation 14, the earth is being harvested. And when the trumpets are being blown, according to Revelation 16, you have the 7 last plagues. So the two, one is the judgment of the kingdom of Christ, the other is the judgment of the kingdom of the beast. But they are overlapping time periods. You have Christ receiving his kingdom. Correspondingly, you have the beast slain and given to the burning flame. All right, so now we come to Sister Bobby's question. What we have is that the 7 seals, as I pointed out, represent an examination of the kingdom of Christ.
Brother
The
David,
first part, yes, Brother Ian.
When you say that they're overlapping, do you mean that at some point, or you mean that they are on several layers of the same prophecy on the same time period?
Right, there are two different representations of the same time period. One representation is based on an examination from the perspective of the kingdom of Christ. The other one is based on an examination from the perspective of the kingdom of the beast. Because whereas you see, for example, you see in Revelation 7, the sealing of the 144,000, they are God's people, and this is a positive event. On the other hand, when you go to Revelation 14, 13 and 14, you see everybody receiving the mark of the beast. So you have the sealing of God, which is positive, and you have the mark of the beast, which is negative. So those time periods overlap. It's the same time that people are receiving the mark of the beast, that God's people are receiving the seal of God. The 144,000 are being sealed at the same time. So it's the same period, but it's two different perspectives.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So back to the seven seals. So we see that the first age of the Christian church, the kingdom of Christ, was set up at Pentecost. The first age of that kingdom is represented as a white horse. This horse represents a time when the church is conquering and it's victorious, and it's in a condition that appears to be very positive. The next stage of the church is represented as a red horse. It not only is a period in the history of the church that is violent when there are many martyrs, but it also seems to represent a period when the pure faith of the apostolic church is being watered down. It's beginning to change nature. And this is corroborated when you go to the third horse, which is a black horse, because we see that this black horse, the rider of this horse, he is willing to sell the wheat and the barley, which represents the word of God. Wheat and barley are the foundation of the word of God. The word of God is represented as bread. Wheat and barley are the foundation of bread. The rider of this horse is willing to sell for a penny, to sell the word of God. And it was a period in the church when compromise was arising. The church was morphing into the papacy. And the next stage of the church represents this very clearly, because you see that this is represented as a pale horse. And the paleness here can be compared to the sickly color of decaying plants. You know, like when you cover, I've heard it described like when you cover an area of grass, you block out the sunlight, you put a box there or something, you go back in a few days and everything is pale and sickly looking, the green is gone. It's a word that has that same kind of connotation, a pale horse. But the rider's name is Death, and hell is following behind him. This is a dark period in the history of the Christian church, when the official Christian church has become so corrupt and so satanic that it is persecuting people and slaughtering Christians, genuine Christians, even though it goes by the name of Christ. Now we come to seal number 5, which involves Sister Bobby's question. Now, in order to explain this for you, Sister Bobby, I have to give some time periods to these seals. Let me just mute. Yeah, I have to give some time periods to these seals, and I just want to repeat that these time periods are a little bit arbitrary, because God never set a date and said the 5th of November in the year 300 is when this period came to an end. You look at the characteristics of these horses and you say, okay, this corresponds generally to this time period of the church. So we put dates on it, right? People put dates on it. And I agree with that method. But those dates, remember, are generalized dates. They're not exact. Like, for example, we say the first horse, the first period of church history was about from the time that Jesus died, or from Pentecost, AD 31, till about the year AD 100. That's the age, about AD 100 was when the last of the apostles died. And the nature of the church began to change. You know, the power was leaving the church. The purity was leaving the church. The next period that we look at was a period where there was great persecution, kind of symbolized by this red horse, and the rider had a sword and he took peace from the earth. There was a great deal of martyrdom under the emperor. I think it was Diocletian, it might have been, the Roman Empire. That's when he fiercely persecuted the Christian church. And we arbitrarily say that this period lasted till about 313, I believe. And then the next period, the black horse, would take us to about the year 538. And again, it's an arbitrary number. Why do we say 538? Because in 538, the papacy was established. The Pope was established as having temporal power, not just religious power. And that power was used to fiercely persecute all those who disagreed with the doctrines of the Catholic Church. So we say this was the period of the pale horse. We come to another period when we see some souls under the altar. And we don't have the time to go back over what we saw or what we examined when we were looking at the seals. The video is there, and maybe somebody could post a link so that if Sister Bobby or anybody else wants to look at it, you can watch that video. But what we saw is that this represents the start of the judgment. The judgment that we're talking about, when does it begin? It did not begin in the time of the apostolic church. It did not begin in the time of the red horse or the black horse or the pale horse. But sometime after the persecution of the Catholic Church came to an end, the next great event in the history of Christ's kingdom would be the judgment, the same judgment that Daniel talks about. You have a phase of the judgment that first of all looks at the past history of the church, and then it moves to the living saints, the 144,000. That's what we have been saying. And this examination here represents that period. And we looked at the evidence. First of all, after these souls were given white robes, and we looked at the meaning of this. Like I said, I'm not going to go back over that now, but the video is there, and you could look at it, or anybody else who wants to look at it. Then the next thing that we saw is that we come to seal number 6. And what we saw on the seal number 6 was that the great day of God's wrath had arrived. And there are certain words there that are clues. The great day of his wrath. Go to Revelation 15 and verse 1. And you will see that the wrath of God is filled up in the 7 last plagues. That's what Revelation tells us. These words are kind of like clue words, key words. God uses a word here, and you find it somewhere else in Revelation, and it's a key that tells you the meaning of this thing. So the great day of God's wrath means that the day, or the time of the 7 last plagues has arrived. Now, something is wrong, because you ask the question, where are God's people at this time? The people who believe in the rapture, they say that God's people are gone. They don't even study the book of Revelation, many of them, because they say it doesn't matter, because they won't be here. They'll be gone in the rapture. But of course, we know that they are going to be very severely mistaken. They are already mistaken, and they are going to be severely surprised, because this day of God's wrath is the final confrontation between the forces of evil and God's representatives on this planet. It's a last great confrontation. God is not just going to withdraw his presence. God is not just going to torture people without meaning and without any sense. There is a purpose why God allows people to still continue to live even after grace is over. There is to be a final manifestation on this planet, a final confrontation between supreme purity and holiness. The glory of God is to appear in stark contrast to the ultimate I don't want to say conclusion, the ultimate results, the ultimate consequences of Satan's government. Yeah, the ultimate consequences. Where does Satan's government lead? What is the end point of Satan's government? He rebelled against God in heaven. He brought his rebellion to earth. What does it really look like when God steps back and allows Satan's government to have its perfect way? This is what we will see during the time of the wrath of God. The more I think about it, the more I am persuaded the wrath of God is not God actively torturing people. I believe what God will do is leave the planet to the government of Satan without God intervening.
Romans 1, David?
Yes, Brother Matt. Romans 1 talks about it, right? The wrath of God being revealed. God left them up. God left them to themselves. Yes. So we are going to see this if we live. But the world is going to see this, and in contrast, the world is going to see the kingdom of God in this 144,000. They are going to see the difference between the two systems of government. That is why God's people have to be here. God is not taking us out of the world. People can come to this conclusion if they don't understand the purposes of God and if they are not looking at the bigger picture. But we are here because we are God's witnesses. God has a demonstration to make. That's why we are still here. If it were not for this, then as soon as we become Christians, God could take us out of the world. No need to leave us here. Because once we become Christians, we are already His. Take us out of the world and take us away from the trials and trouble, because it's over for us. But no, it's not over. We are a part of a greater purpose. And that purpose is to be finally fully realized in the last great confrontation in the great day of God's wrath. So,
Yeah, the question has to be answered, Brother David. Who's able to stand?
that's the point I'm coming to now. Because, so to Sister Bobby's question, seal number 6 is the introduction to the 7 last plagues. But something is to happen before seal number 6. And at this point, God introduces it. It actually happens before seal number 6, but God does not show us until after we see seal number 6. That's Revelation 7. Seal number 6 is Revelation 6. And there's a question at the end of Revelation 6, the very last line. It says, who shall be able to stand? The great day of God's wrath has arrived, and who shall be able to stand? And God answers that question, because what He shows us is that there is the 144,000 who will be sealed, and they are going to be sealed before before the 6th seal is open. Because if they wait until the 6th seal is open, it's going to be too late. When the great day of God's wrath comes, you have to be already sealed. You're not going to be sealed at that time, because at that time the censer is cast down, grace is ended, probation has closed. It's too late at that time. So the sealing of the 144,000 will take place during that period of the judgment.
I just want to ask, because I was in discussion with somebody and I couldn't explain this, but I was trying to tell her that right now we're probably in the 5th seal, and then she was saying, no, we're in the 6th seal. And so she said, because all these things have happened, like because the sun became as black as a sackcloth of hair way back a long time ago. But I remembered you saying that it's sometime in the future. And when I got to thinking about it, and I guess, you're saying these things, they like are they come on top of each other, side by side. So so are you saying that this disturbance came back in the 1700s or something like that?
Okay,
And
let me explain the 6th seal, and I understand what this person is saying. The thing is, one of the reasons why I feel a little helpless when I have a discussion on Revelation with people who they have a different view. You see, what I'm trying to do is to give us a perspective that you can see from where I'm coming from. There are people who they take a completely different approach to the book, like this lady you are talking about. You can't see eye to eye with this person, because they understand the horses differently. They understand what is happening in Revelation completely differently, and so it's kind of, you don't even know where to start, because you can't start and give the person a study from verse 1 right through. You can't do that in a short discussion. So it's kind of very frustrating when you try to have a discussion like this, because Adventists believe, and you are speaking to an Adventist, they believe that in 1780 you had the great earthquake that Revelation 6 talks about, and then in 1833 you had the falling of the stars, and then a couple of years later you had the sun. I'm giving you the wrong date. 1780 was the dark day, and then in 1833 they say was the falling of the stars. But anyway, they believe that these events happened historically back in the past, and this is because Adventists are what you call, they interpret Revelation in a historical way. They believe that they believe that the seven trumpets represent historical events in the distant past, and they see the seals as being the same thing. So of course they think that we are under seal number 6. They don't see the 144,000 as being sealed here where I just put it. What they see is that it's like this. And the next thing we are looking for now is the sealing of the 144,000. But seal number 6 is a problem because they say we already had the great earthquake in 1755. We already had the dark day in 1780. We already had the falling of the stars in 1833. So these things are already past. But the funny thing is, it also says the great day of God's wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand? Well, they say that part of it is not yet fulfilled. So they say that is still to be fulfilled, and then we will see the sealing of the 144,000, because that's how they interpret the sequence of what is happening here. And what I've been trying to do is to present a perspective that shows you that this is not, if that was a fulfillment, I believe it was just a secondary fulfillment. There is such a thing, okay? There is such a thing. It has been known to happen. Matthew 24 gives us about 3 fulfillments, at least 2, but at least about 3 fulfillments of what is called the abomination of desolation. Sometimes God gives you one prophecy that has more than one meaning. You can think of one where Peter says that the prophecy of Joel was fulfilled on the day of Pentecost. I'll pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. And yet every one of us is looking for another fulfillment of this down at the end of time here. So there are prophecies like that. And I'm not saying this could possibly be like that, but I'm telling you my conviction that the real primary meaning of this passage is that the sun will be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, there'll be this great earthquake, the stars will fall in the future, in rapid succession, like in a matter of days. What Adventists interpret is that one took place in 1755. Then 25 years later, you had the dark day. Then about 50 something years later, you had the falling of the stars. And then 200 years later, and we are still waiting for the next event. This makes the prophecy, in my opinion, really disconnected and disjointed and meaningless, because the way, if you look at Revelation chapter 6, when it talks about the opening of the 6th seal, everything happens rapidly. When he opened the 6th seal, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of air, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. And every rich man and every bondman and every free man ran to hide himself in the rocks and in the mountains. This happens rapidly. It begins with the great earthquake, and all of this is what causes people to be running to hide from the wrath of God. That is supposed to have happened over 300 years ago, and nothing. Where are the people running to hide? Where are they running to the rocks and the mountains to hide? I don't believe that this is the primary meaning of the prophecy. I think that's a misunderstanding. So that's my comment on that, Sister Bobby.
Oh, okay.
All right. So when the 7th seal is open, seal number 7 now, you had the 7 trumpets, right? And we never spent much time looking at the trumpets in detail because, like I said, I believe that these have to do with the 7, they're the same as the 7 last plagues. And we did look at the reason why we come to this conclusion. But what we saw is that in between trumpet number 6 and trumpet number 7, there is a break. And we have Revelation 10 and 11 coming in at that place where you see the 2 witnesses. And we explained why we have this break. It's because God is stopping to explain to us how the mystery of God is to be finished. But these 2 witnesses actually belong right back at the beginning. They belong back at the beginning before the trumpets, back in the time of the sealing and so on. And we had this beautiful picture that I like very much, where it shows you the same thing in a kind of graphic view. You have the angel, first angel throwing down the censer. And so the trumpets begin to blow. The first trumpet, there's hail and fire mingled with blood that burns up a third of the green things and burns up a third of the grass and so on. The second trumpet blows, and a great mountain burning with fire falls upon the sea, and a third of the sea turns to blood. The third angel sounds, and a star whose name is wormwood falls upon the rivers and fountains of water, and they become bitter like wormwood. The fourth angel blows his trumpet, and a third of the sun and of the moon and of the stars are smitten. The next angel blows his trumpet, and the bottomless pit is open, and there comes out of the pit locusts upon the earth, who have hair like women and faces like scorpion and all kinds of things. And then the next angel, his trumpet number 6, blows, and the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates are loosed. And then the next thing you're expecting, trumpet number 7. But before it's blown, God stops the movie, and he says, hold on a minute. When trumpet number 7 blows, the mystery of God is going to be finished. So let me take you back and show you how this mystery of God is going to be finished, what will contribute to the finishing of the mystery. And we see it starts with the opening of the book of Daniel. The angel gives John the book and he says, eat. It's a little book open, and we saw clearly that this book is the book of Daniel. The angel eats it, that John eats it, sweet in his mouth, bitter in his belly, and the angel says, you must prophesy again before peoples and nations and tongues and kings. This message that arises is the message that is the key to the finishing of the mystery of God. I feel very optimistic because I think God has given us an understanding of this mystery of God. And all of us who have been a part of this fellowship, you know that this message is the central component of everything that we preach. And I think all of you have grasped the importance of it. While there are many ministries, and I don't want to be arrogant, but I still feel that I am telling the truth when I say that the emphasis of this ministry is the emphasis that God wants the world to have. There are people who will preach it better than I preach it, and there are people who will have greater influence, and there are people who will carry it far and wide. It will happen. The little part that we are playing in explaining it may be small, but no matter whether it is small or it is big, and whether somebody else will have the privilege of preaching it to the world, it is the truth, and it is God's message for the age and for the time. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is peripheral. So we see that after the eating of the book, God says, the angel says, you must prophesy again. And so the 2 witnesses prophesy. And that's a final preaching message on this planet. When it comes to an end, the 2 witnesses are killed. The word of God and the Spirit of God have no more place on this planet. They cannot open another door. They cannot pry open another hard heart. It is the end for the planet. And all that is left is the confrontation between the final confrontation between the 144,000 and those who have the mark of the beast. Divine glory and satanic darkness face to face for the final and the greatest time in the history of the world. That's what it is about. And when that is over, then you have the blowing of the 7th trumpet, the end of the plagues, and the great voice says, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of his Christ. The mystery of God is finished, and he shall
Brother
reign
David.
forever and ever. Yes, Brother Matt.
I remember a couple of Sabbaths ago, you were talking about the seals and the break between the 6th and 7th seal and Revelation 10. And is there, so now that there's a break between the 6th and 7th plague, is there a correlation? You were trying to make a connection there between those 2 breaks.
No, well, what I was trying to do is to show you that God uses the same device. Not that I don't think those 2 periods correlate, but God uses the same technique. When I say technique, I mean the same technique of taking you to a climax and then taking you back in time to give you the background. And I was making the point that this is a device that movie makers use. People who are writing books, they use that technique. You come to an exciting place, and just when you're about to step over to the next, to the conclusion, or to get the real meat of it, they take you back into the past, because You need some background information to understand what is happening, is about to happen next. And this is what God does. It's really a very interesting method when you understand what is happening. And if you don't understand what is happening, it can be very confusing. One of the reasons why people get the sequence of Revelation so mixed up is because they don't understand that this device is being used. But there are clues, there are very strong clues as you go along that show you that this is what God is doing. Like, for example,
Right, David.
I'm coming in. Just hold on a second. Between seal number 6 and seal number 7, the question is asked, who shall be able to stand? That is the clue statement. That's a statement. God is not asking you to answer this question because you don't know the answer. He's asking you the question because he wants to get your attention. And then he's going to give you the answer in the 144,000. And he does the same thing in Revelation chapter 9, because the angel says, in the days of the 7th angel, when he's about to sound, it tells you that something is about to happen, and it takes you back in time. But the real clue is when you go to chapter 11 and you hear there's a voice that says, the second woe is past, trumpet number 6 is gone, and the third woe is coming quickly. Trumpet number 7 is about to blow. The word quickly is the clue that tells you there is no break between number 6 and number 7. The third woe comes quickly. There's no break. So where does this huge break with the angel and the little book and the 2 witnesses, where does that come in? It certainly does not belong between number 6 and number 7 trumpet. It doesn't belong there. But God gives you the clue. There's no reason why the angel says the second woe is past and the third woe comes quickly. Why the word quickly? God is using the word because he's giving you a clue that you are to understand there's no break between the trumpets. So then you can place the work of the 2 witnesses in the proper place. You realize it doesn't belong here. I have to go back in time and, okay, I figure out why God puts it here. But now I'm beginning to get the picture. But it confuses people who if you don't pick up what is happening, you get very confused and you misunderstand what is happening in Revelation. Go ahead, Brother Ian.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of confusion about the time periods of the 7 plagues and the 7 trumpets. I see Kevin posted something in the chat just now. I was going to ask about that. But what I wanted you to mention or to do a recap on is the significance of the 3 woes.
All right, let me come to the 2 words, but let me see. Kevin says, I was thinking they correlated to the same time period. No, I'm confused. Let me see if I can explain why I say they don't correspond. Let me go back and look at these charts. I don't want to leave anybody confused, and you know I don't. So let me go back a little bit.
I think he says he gets it though after that post. There was another post that said I totally
what I
get it.
get, what I understand is the tool of using the break in between and then going back. But what I don't understand is where the actual 2 witnesses are being killed, the spirit and the word, we know. But the sealing, I thought that the 2 breaks that occur in the first section and then the break that occurs in the second section, although they bring you back before the first part, that I thought they lined up. But I mean, I understand the tool. I understand the tool of taking it and then moving it back to the beginning. I just don't understand how they don't correlate. That's all.
All right, okay, and let me just explain. Look at where the break comes here. It comes just before the trumpets. Can you see that? The break comes after seal number 6 when it says the great day of God's wrath has come. All right, you have a break. All right, I actually have the 144,000 here, but actually they are presented after seal number 6. Just let me know if we follow that.
Makes sense.
Right? Because chapter 6 tells you the great day of his wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand. And the next thing you see is the sealing of the 144,000. I have put it here before seal number 6 because I'm saying that's where it actually happens.
Yeah, that
But in
makes
the
sense.
chapter, right? But in the chapter itself, you don't actually get it until chapter number 7. It's actually after seal number 6.
Right.
So when you come to the end of seal number 6, remember the blowing of the trumpets does not begin until seal number 7. The trumpets are actually after the 7 seals. I want to be sure that that point is being understood. Where does the 7 trumpets come from? They come from out of seal number 7. They're a subset of seal number 7. The 7 trumpets do not overlap with the seals at all. They come out of seal number 7. They're a subset of seal number 7.
Right.
So when you're looking at the trumpets now, what are you looking at? You're looking at the 7 last plagues. These seals here have nothing to do with the plagues.
Right.
Only when you come to seal number 7, then the plagues begin. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plagues. And then before plague number 7, God says, hold on, I'm going to take you back in time and show you something. So he takes us back in time, but that period when he takes us back in time, of course, it doesn't correspond to this period because this period, the plagues never even started when we were looking at the seals.
So it's after seal 6, but before the first trumpet.
What is before the first trumpet, you are saying?
The 2 witnesses being killed.
Yes, it's I can see where I need to do another chart because I'm kind of confusing everybody a little bit. Do I have anything that can point it out? I don't know if I have a chart that.
I think you just passed one.
No, that is to deal with the woes, Ian, which you were asking about, but I was trying to find a way to correlate the I need to line them up side by side. What's that, Nikki?
The part where it goes back to show about the 2 witnesses, that's within seal 7, it's just that it happened before all the plagues.
I'm going to pause a little bit and I'm going to ask some questions, and I would like you to answer the question, not anybody in particular, but I need the answers to make sure we are following along. What is confusing is the time of the trumpets and the time of the seals. I'm going to ask you to compare it to something. Let's compare the seals to the months of the year and the trumpets to the weeks of December. So you have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. When you come to December, what happens is that you have 3 weeks until Christmas. So you have week number 1, week number 2, week number 3. They have nothing to do with this 11 months that passed before. They don't correspond. Let me put it another way. Let's say 12 days of December, 12 days of Christmas, 12 days of December. You have 12 months in the year and you have 12 days in December. I start showing you day number 1, day number 2. Remember, it has nothing to do with the 11 months. They are a different sequence of events, even though you have a similar 12 in December. Those 12 are a subset of the 12 months. That's the picture we keep in mind when we are looking at the seals versus the trumpets. You have 7 trumpets, then when you come to, you have 7 seals, then when you come to seal number 7, out of seal number 7, there comes 7 trumpets. Now, when we are going through the 7 trumpets, God pauses at trumpet number 6. He says, hold on, let me take you back in time. So maybe what we're asking is, when God takes us back in time, how far back does he go?
Exactly.
Maybe that's the question. How far back does he go? Well, he goes back right down to the period of the seals. Yes, I agree with that. It goes back to the period of the seal. Like in the illustration I gave you, he would have gone right back down in the month of December. He might step right back down to July or May, to some event that happened there, which is necessary for you to understand what is happening in December. Tell me if that illustration helps us to understand. If there's still a
Yes,
question,
but where is the witnesses? Where they were, like, in which seal?
all right,
Yeah.
you can work that out for yourself, because listen, these two witnesses are the ones who are there when probation closes. They are the two who are there when probation comes to an end. What time period do you think they belong to? You tell me. In the seals,
The sixth seal?
the sixth seal. Try again.
Before.
They belong to the time of the sealing of the 144,000. These two witnesses,
So they do correlate.
right? There is a
Yeah.
correlation in the sense that it takes you back to that time period. But when you say correlate, I thought you were asking, does the gap here correspond to the gap in the seals? I thought that's what
But
you were asking.
if that's when the two witnesses are killed and when before probation closes, wouldn't that be the same time as the sealing of the 144,000 for the great multitude?
When yes, it's the same period. When the two witnesses are killed is when the angel throws down the censer.
So that's what I was saying. That's what I was asking. My previous question was if the two witnesses are killed at the beginning of the seventh seal, like before all the trumpets then.
Not the beginning of the seventh seal. Yeah, well, at the blowing of the seventh seal, when the censer is thrown down, that represents the end of grace, which is the same thing as the killing of the two witnesses, and that marks the beginning of the plagues.
Yeah, that means that the seventh seal is open when the plagues start happening, and the plagues are corresponding to the trumpets, no?
Right. So the two witnesses would actually begin round about the time when you have the souls under the altar during that fifth seal. The two witnesses might begin there, because the two witnesses, remember, it's a movement that begins with the eating of the book of Daniel. All right, but it becomes more intense, and then it comes to the 144,000. So you could say the two witnesses belong sometime in the period of the fifth seal, and by the time the sixth seal comes, when it says the great day of his wrath is come, they are already there and they're about to die. And when the seventh seal is open, then they die.
Okay.
Brother D.
Just before brother Kevin, I want to know. Kevin, are you following me?
Yeah, that makes 100% more sense.
All right, great. All right. So yes, go ahead, brother Frederick, and then I think brother Sean.
I just a little detail. I know you want us to. We are looking at the broader picture, but a little of the details as it pertains to the trumpet. The trumpets are representing the last plagues. This is a position that you're putting forward, that the trumpets, the blowing of the trumpets, represents the time of the seven last plagues. But if just for example, Revelation 8, um, 8 and 9, I believe, that deals with the blowing of the second trumpet. It talks about no, not the second trumpet. It's actually the second trumpet. It says and it was um,
The mountain burning with
great
fire.
mountain, right? Fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood, right? But for the seven last plagues, as it would, the correlation with that trumpet would be the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea,
Hmm.
and it became as blood of a
Right.
dead man, and every living creature or soul in the sea died in the sea. So I see the trumpet, the trumpets of Revelation 8. I mean, most of them, if not all, talks about a destruction or um, a destruction of just a third part of what is find the word, what is represented there. So anything that relates to the blowing of the trumpet at that time only affects a third of whatever it is dealing with. But in Revelation 16, as it relates to the last plagues, it talks about everything being destroyed and not just a third. So I see that there is to come some form of plagues that would not be a fulsome destruction of all things, but then there's another set of plagues that would deal with everything and not just a third.
Okay.
I don't know if I put it or I'm seeing it.
Sure, I
Words.
understand, Brother Frederick, and it's worth considering, right? It's worth considering. I have not. I don't respond. I won't respond to this because the thing is, I can't respond unless I have a better understanding. Here's what I know. The numbers in Revelation, I freely admit that there are numbers I'm suspicious about because I don't understand them, right? For example, when he talks about a third of the stars are smitten, and a third of the sun is smitten, and a third of the moon is smitten, I don't know what a third of the moon means. I don't know what a third of the sun means. So I could ask the question, is this number a third? Is it a figurative number? Is it an exact number? Does it mean a third in terms of the space of the thing or in terms of the part of the world that it affects? To be honest, I'm going to be very honest and say I don't have a confident answer to any of those questions. At the same time, there are so many potential answers to that question, so many, that I still feel very safe to say I think they are the same event, because it very much depends upon how we are interpreting those numbers. So I'm not throwing out the point that you made, but I'm saying that there are so many potential answers that I'm also not saying that I would accept it right off the bat. Okay, so that's how I would respond to that. Brother Sean wanted to say something, I think.
Oh, I was just asking for the witnesses. Do Even though we go back in time, God brings us back in time, it is still future though, futuristic.
Absolutely, absolutely, because we do not. Well, I would say that if you ask me, I would say the book of Daniel has already been eaten. I don't know if all of us would agree, but there is one part of Daniel that I personally am still in a little bit of confusion about. When I say confusion, it's because I can't see anything that really is very clear to me, and it's about the king of the north coming against the king of the south in the time of the end. I'm not clear on this. I've seen many different ideas, but none of them really goes click in my mind, and so I'm still kind of waiting to understand this better. And some of the time periods right there in Daniel 12, they are also a challenge for me. But at the same time, I think what is described by the angel, eating the book, sweet and bitter, and a prophetic message, I believe that the book of Daniel has already been eaten, and we are already seeing the fruit of what comes from the book of Daniel. That's what we are studying this evening. But at the same time, I don't believe it has reached that place yet when the two witnesses are given power, because God says, I will give power to my two witnesses. God's people are to receive great power for a time period, and I believe it is during the time that the 144,000 are being sealed. I think it's during the time of the mark of the beast crisis, because the Bible says they will be prophesying in sackcloth. It means that there's going to be great persecution while the message is being carried forward. So they're prophesying under great persecution, but with great power. And the Bible suggests here that it will be for a 3.5-year time period, 1260 days. So I would say, yes, Brother Sean, that part of the prophecy, I believe, is in the immediate future.
Brother David.
Yeah, yes, I just would like to know if Sean if Sean got the answer.
Oh, yes. That's clear. Thanks so much, brother David.
Okay, Brother Sean. Go ahead, Brother Ian.
Yeah, I've not to take too much time, but I just read through the 7 last plagues of Revelation 16, and what I observe is that even though the vials are poured out on these various entities and are affected, it doesn't say that it happens in entirety. It's like in Genesis, the Bible say God said, "Let us make man," and some people say it's 3 people that spoke when it could have been 2. So in this case, the vial is poured upon the sea and it becomes blood, but it didn't say the entire sea. So it could still be a third and still be accurate. That's the point I wanted to make.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so there are possible that this is why in looking at it as Brother Frederick pointed out, I'm trying to take an overview. I'm not going to the details because in my honest opinion, I think some of the details require a greater understanding of certain things. And some of those certain things are, what do some of these numbers mean? I confess that I am still searching for answers for some of this. And some of the answers that people would give, I'm not satisfied. I mean, one of the things is that, as we pointed out, Adventists said that there was silence in heaven for half an hour, and it means that heaven was empty. Jesus and the angels were on the way back to earth. And I had to reject that outright, because when I looked at the Bible and I began to look at the images that I see in Revelation, it doesn't make sense at all. So I'm thinking some of the other assumptions that are made, or some of the other things that are taught as actual fact, when you look at them, you might have to revise the way you see it. So the details, I believe, are things that we can fit in afterwards. But to get the broad picture, in my opinion, is the most important thing. That's what I believe. Okay. So that's what I'm trying to really emphasize and focus on.
Absolutely.
So all right. So the woes. I don't want to confuse you brethren again, but just to explain the 3 woes. Let me go back a frame. All right. Look at this picture. Last week I pointed this out. The person who drew this picture, I like it, because if you notice the last 3 trumpets, there is a little word coming out of the trumpet, and that's exactly how Revelation expresses it. Woe, woe, woe. These last 3 trumpets. And why they are called woes is because there is an angel who flies in the midst of heaven after the 4th trumpet. After the 4th trumpet, when a third of the moon and a third of the sun and a third of the stars are smitten, an angel says, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by reason of the other 3 trumpets which are still to blow." So it sounds like these last 3 are more devastating than the first 4. When you actually read it, you don't see why they are so terrible. But well, you can see, yes, you can see that one of them, the bottomless pit, is open. Maybe it's a demonic invasion. Who knows what it is? I don't. As I said, I can't really pinpoint the details, but the bottomless pit is open. The number 5, the 4 angels that are bound in the river Euphrates, and there's an army of horsemen that number 100 million, and blood comes out of the horses, comes out up to the bridle of the horses. It suggests great destruction. And I'm not trying to interpret it. I'm just telling you that it seems to be terrible woes upon planet Earth. The third woe is that it's the coming of Jesus. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God, and the world is about to be destroyed. So I guess that's really the worst woe that there could ever be for the people of the world. So anyway, but what is interesting is that the angel says, "Woe, woe, woe," and then later on you find that these 3 trumpets are described as 3 woes, 3 woes. All right, so it's mentioned in Revelation, and that's just why I'm mentioning it. So you have 4 trumpets, and then you have 3 more. Yeah, here is where it is. Revelation 8:13. It says, "And I beheld an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpets of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound." So the last 3 angels are 3 woes. And as I pointed out, between woe number 2 and woe number 3, God stops the action and he takes us back to the little book and the 2 witnesses. But as we have seen, there is no break. There is no break. And that's about where we would be with our revision for this evening. All right. I think my software got a little mixed up, and I wanted to do the revision, and I find that my revision has taken me 1 hour and 10 minutes, which really means it's too late for me to start another study this evening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the room open at this moment. I know we had the questions all along, but I'm going to leave the room open. I'm going to leave the room open for questions or comments. If there are none, what we'll do is we'll end a little bit early this evening. Not really early, it's been over an hour, but early in terms of the prophecy study. So are there any questions, any comments, any further points that need to be highlighted? All right. I know
Brother
that.
David,
Yes, Brother Cliff, go ahead.
I was just saying, this was pretty intense, and I was following it all along. Maybe you could give us a preview, not go in depth, but give us a preview of what's to come and an overview of what what is to come for the next couple of weeks in terms of your study. You don't have to go in details, but just give us an overview of what to be expecting.
Okay, that's reasonable, and that's something I can do without taking up too much time. So I appreciate the comment, Brother Cliff, and the request is a good one. So we have ended phase 1 in that we have come to the end of the examination of history from the perspective of the Christian church. We have seen the church deteriorate and get very bad, and then the judgment, and then at the end, there is a blaze of glory on the final confrontation between the kingdom of Christ and the kingdom of Satan. And as we see in Daniel, the judgment will sit and the verdict will be given that the beast is to be given to the burning flame and the Son of Man is to receive an everlasting kingdom. That's the verdict of the judgment we know beforehand. So the next week, what will happen is that we will go to Revelation 12, where we begin phase 2, or the second part now of the book. And in Revelation 12, what we see is that God presents the key adversaries in what is happening. We see a woman and we see a dragon ready to devour her child, and we see this child. If you look at the imagery of Revelation 12, it takes you right back to the book of Genesis, where God said that the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head and the serpent would bruise his heel. Here in Revelation 12, you see where it all started, and God shows you how the conflict intensifies, because here is the dragon and he's trying to destroy the seed of the woman. But the seed of the woman escapes and is taken up to God and to his throne. And so Satan carries on his conflict on the earth, first against the woman and then against the remnant of the woman's seed. This is a setting for what happens next in the rest of Revelation. So the conflict comes down to the conflict between the dragon and the seed of the remnant of the seed. It's a seed of the woman, which is Jesus Christ, but it's the remaining portion of that seed. There's a part of that body remaining on earth, and that is what Satan sets out to destroy. So what happens next is chapter 13, where it tells you about the mark of the beast, and then chapter 14, where it tells you about the sealing of the 144,000. And then in chapter 14, part B, it tells you about the harvest. It tells you that the Son of Man puts in his sickle and he reaps the harvest of the earth. And then in chapter 15, the grapes of the earth, the harvest of the grapes, they are thrown into the great wine press of the wrath of God, and you have the 7 last plagues. So it's really the judgment of Satan's kingdom, but it really focuses on, it doesn't carry you through the long history that we have when we are looking at the kingdom of Christ. It really begins with the final part of the history, when the 144,000 is being sealed and when the judgment is taking place. That's what we are looking at in terms of Satan's kingdom. And in brief, that is it. But it's not quite over, because then God zeroes in on the beast and his paramour. the beast and his girlfriend, the woman that rides the beast, the woman Babylon. God zeroes in on this and he gives us details about this woman and the beast, because in looking at this in the judgment, there are details that we need to understand. And we get those details in Revelation 17 and Revelation 18 and 19. Revelation 17, 18, and 19. And then that brings us to the end of part 2. So in brief, Brother Cliff, that's what we're going to be looking at over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
David,
Yes, Brother Sean.
just a suggestion. For next week, probably because probably if you do back, I mean, when you start the study next week, 3:30, probably, I mean, going and recapping and all of that might, you probably might not even start the new, going forward. So is it that you could do, probably give what you did this week, just probably give a recap during the morning session, during Sabbath school, so that at 3:30 you can just freely move on, and probably you could get some more like graphical presentations, just to make it a little bit more easier to understand. Just a suggestion.
I appreciate it, Sean. And what you're saying, I am acutely aware of. I'm aware that I have a habit that every time I'm starting, I do a recap. And I know it's good, but I also know it's a little bit of a humbug, because we move more slowly. So I don't think I'm going to do another recap next week, because we spent all this evening doing recaps. Next week, we're going to start fresh. If there's anybody new, we're starting straight with Revelation 12. If there's anybody new, what I will do is recommend looking at the videos, because I realize that I don't regret it. I don't regret it, because the thing is, I'm very happy for the questions and the detailed re-examination, because it forces us to think about it and to understand it better. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the most critical thing.
That's good.
I don't think we should move along fast and only get. I am aware of how tricky it is to understand Revelation. Even if we have some things wrong, I'm aware it's very tricky, because my view and my understanding of Revelation, it's years. I've read through the book of Revelation at least 30 times, probably more, but at least 30, maybe 40. I stopped counting after a while. And I've been, because like I told you, for the first 10, 15 years, all I did was study prophecy. And I know how hard it was for me to finally get some ideas. And I know how complicated it is, because what we're trying to explain here about these flashbacks and how things correspond to things, I know it's not easy. So I understand why repeating things and getting your questions is vital. I don't want to leave anybody behind. But I agree with you that sometimes when we have something and we understand it, it's tedious to go back over it. So hopefully we all are together in where we are at the moment now. And next week we can just move on to part 2. But at the same time, if there's anything that is really a glitch in somebody's mind, and we really need to have an answer, don't be afraid to ask a question. I know a couple of weeks ago somebody said, we should hold the questions until the end, and I thought about it, and I know it causes disruption. But the thing is, we're trying to understand. We don't want to be too formal and get stuck in a routine where we want to finish the program and people get left behind without understanding what I'm trying to say. It's an exercise in defeat, because the whole purpose is that we understand. And if we're not understanding, what's the sense of finishing the program and we don't understand? So that's my thought on it. All right.
I really do, I think it was in God's purpose that all of this happened this evening. It clears up a lot of little things. And therefore, I think that we are at a point now where we can move forward.
All right. Okay.
I think, Brother David, also it would be probably ideal, taking Sean's suggestion that, I kind of, the day's already packed. The Sabbath, the 12 o'clock period is packed with a lot of presentations and sermons, and this time is packed with prophecy and stuff. So giving a summary would be kind of hard. I think the ideal situation would be, which would put too much pressure on you, but to have this study in correlation with a site in which a preview could be recorded and put to the site with your slides, so that on our own we could click on these previews and watch it, and we could look at the slides and study it and go to the word and study it a little to see where things line up. But we don't keep the live, we leave the live sessions to the teaching of the lesson, so we are not bogged down with summaries and stuff like that. And if we have questions, then we could interact with you I don't know if I'm making sense to you, am I?
Yeah, well, what I'm going to definitely do is try to make the charts as simple as possible and a little bit more comprehensive. That I'm going to work on, because I realize that there is a need for this. But I think, all the sessions, thank God, so far are recorded and they are there. So I think that when we have been through a discussion like we've had this evening, I don't think that there's any need to go back over anything. It is there, and what I would recommend is that I can say, go to such and such a video and check this one, and you will find the answer to that particular question. Just look at it a little more carefully. So I don't think there's going to be need to do much more than that, and so we will go
That makes
forward.
sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
All right, Brother Clay. All right, guys. Well, thank you. I know it's still early, and we might not be quite ready to go, but it's we have been 1 hour and 20 minutes, and it doesn't make sense to start anything else. So just I'm going to close off the recording at this point and leave the room open so we can fellowship if we want to, or leave if we want to.